Time to chop it up with Alex Brink. After another WSU Cougar win, they are now 2-0 after defeating San Diego State, their second straight game at home. Alex, thanks for joining us again. I think one thing that comes to mind when you look at this game was we kind of saw more of the potential for this offense. A lot more points, obviously, but just the way they were moving the ball. What did you see? I know you were down on field level, so maybe a different view for you. What were you seeing in that game that led to the success?
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've watched a game from field level, to be honest with you. But really, what stood out to me was the creativity. I think you kind of saw from week one to week two, where this offense could go. Right, there was some explosive plays in the running game, which was great. You saw big explosive plays with play action pass. I love the creativity with offensive formations and motions. You'd see things like, Tony Freeman's kind of hiding behind the line of scrimmage, and then all of a sudden, pre-snap, he goes in motion and gets outside, and defense loses track of him, and and they get a quick completion. Things like that. Those make things easy on the quarterback. They set up bigger plays. Like the Leon Neal Jr. touchdown, right, off of a little bit of play action. I really liked the plan that Danny Freund had. I think Jimmy Rogers kind of loosened the leash, so to speak, as far as letting him call some more plays to push the ball downfield, and that ultimately ended up opening up the running game for the Cougs to rush for over 140 yards.
Yeah, on the running game front, obviously miles and miles better than the performance against Idaho, and still not where Coach Rogers and Coach Freund would want the rushing attack. But it was very encouraging to see some of those runs. It obviously didn't break any of 40 or 50 yards, but even those runs that a first down run that breaks off 8 yards. I mean, that's just so refreshing to see the struggles. Was there anything that stood out to you that led to that huge improvement and still room to improve week one to week two?
That's probably two things. I think the offensive line definitely played better. They were better at the point of attack. They frankly against Idaho, there were times they just missed blocks or went the wrong direction, which is to be expected. Maybe with some new players in their first week of play, and in week two there was significantly less of that, if any. Kind of mental errors at the point of attack. I mean, they were getting bodies on everybody. I think the second thing that really stood out to me is that Kirby Voorhees, the redshirt sophomore running back, got way more carries. I think he's a more downhill runner maybe than Angel Johnson. And so in certain situations, he's probably a better fit at times. And he really stood out to me as far as his execution, how hard he runs. I think in general, what I really appreciated about the offense in general, and the rush offense in general was, in those short yardage situations, they were really, really pretty effective, right? They didn't have the third and ones or third and twos that got stopped. I mean, most of the time they were converting on short yardage downs, which was great.
Obviously, the defense with another great week. I think the biggest swing in this game was at the end of the first half, the safety that the Cougars then parlayed into another touchdown. At that point, you go from a slim lead at halftime to all of a sudden a two-score lead, getting close to a three-score advantage in the second half. I'll put you in the mind of another OC or another quarterback facing this Cougar defense. What do they do so well that has, through 2 weeks at least, disrupted the offenses that they've faced?
Well, they're really fast, so they don't, for instance, in that, in the safety, they're just rushing four guys, right? And Isaac Terrell just flat beats the left tackle. So when you can rush four or even three at times and drop seven or eight, that's a really hard matchup for an offensive player, and a play caller and a quarterback. The other thing I would say is that they close space really fast. So there's times where you think you have a good play going, or maybe as a quarterback, you're like, oh, that guy's open. I'm going to throw it to him and he's going to make a big play or be completion. And then they're able to close that space really quickly. And it either turns into a short gain or an incompletion. And so I think that's what San Diego State found. I think they thought they had more opportunity to spread the field out, and just the Cougar team speed was just too much for them.
Absolutely. So the Cougars took care of business. They are now 2-0 heading into their first road game of the season. Obviously, things are going to be a little bit different away from home. But just what do you think this team does well that travels? I mean, you know better than anybody what it means, the difference between playing at home and playing on the road. What have you seen so far that encourages you as they go down to take on a North Texas squad that has also shown a lot of promise early in this season?
I just think in general, they obviously play great defense. I think this is a really good defensive football team with a lot of veteran experience. And so, when you talk about travel trips and those sort of things, you really rely on your leaders to kind of pull everybody along with them and, be prepared and be locked in and not get distracted by the things that can distract you when you're on the road. You also have to bring your own energy, right, when you're on the road because your crowd's probably not going to be the one making the noise. And oftentimes the side of the football that is able to generate energy is defense, right? They make big plays, big tackles, sacks, things, turnovers. So I think this team is really uniquely set up to have some success there. You also get back potentially one of your best players in Kale Reader at the safety position.
Huge,
So that's
absolutely
good.
huge.
Right. So that's going to be a huge boost for an already good defense. You get Reader back in there. So a lot of energy potentially on that side of the football, which then will translate and help, maybe a little bit younger, less experienced offense.
Eric Morris, head coach at North Texas, obviously was the offensive coordinator here at Washington State when Cam Ward was the quarterback. Those two coming over from Incarnate Word. From what you remember, and I'm sure that he's tweaked the offense a little bit since he's gone down there to Denton. But what do you think that this offense will look like for the Cougar defense in terms of a matchup standpoint?
Yeah, you're going to get, very similar pass concepts as we knew as Coug fans for years, starting with Mike Leach and then, Eric Morris and then Ben Arbuckle. You get a lot of mesh, a lot of shallows coming across the field, some four vertical concepts. They're going to really lean into the quick passing game and the screen game a lot. And then what Eric Morris does to make things really difficult is he often tags running plays with screen plays. So kind of multiple options for the quarterback. So you're going to see a lot of, what might look like a run turn into a pass based on what the Coug defense is going to do. So there's some similarities, maybe philosophically, of what you saw last week, which was, there was a lot of pre-snap reads for San Diego State, which would determine where they would throw the football or run it. I think Washington State did a good job disguising some looks and making things hard on the Aztecs. They can do the same thing to North Texas by taking away pre-snap reads.
Absolutely. Talking about this matchup, you don't want to get ahead of yourself. Everybody knows what lies after this game. It's the Apple Cup. But the opportunity to go 3-0 in a season that we didn't really know what to expect, the schedule is so odd with all the trips out east. I mean, how valuable would it be to get win number three under your belt before you start really a tough stretch of your schedule where you're starting to face those teams that might be future conference opponents or even just tough road trips like out to Ole Miss? How big is it to get this win this week? Obviously, we know you want to win every week, but specifically in this context.
I just think in general, that one of my big keys going into this season was, Washington State needed to make a bowl game because, you need to stay relevant in the national conversation in the recruiting world, NIL, like all those things, transfer portal late into the calendar year. And if you're not playing in a bowl game, you're not relevant, right? And so, the idea of getting to 6 or 7 wins, I think, was essential for Jimmy Rogers and the staff. And so you get two under your belt, that really helps. Yeah, yes, this is a tough trip going to North Texas, but it's maybe not as tough as going way back east to Virginia or even James Madison. We know the Colorado State trip can be tough, and obviously Ole Miss. So you do want to take advantage, and I think I said in general going into the season that these first 4 weeks are going to tell you a lot about who this team is. So I think even more than getting a win, you kind of figure out maybe who you are. With this first road trip, and then the byproduct of a win, you set up a great matchup in the Apple Cup.
Ask you because you obviously get to talk to him a lot, both in a broadcast standpoint, but also outside of it. What you've taken away from Coach Rogers' first couple of weeks of games? Obviously, he's been there for longer than that, but I was kind of fascinated with his press conference this week on Monday. Just the sheer intensity and how he was talking about, if he's coaching up a guy, he'll be honest with you, but he'll still be your biggest supporter, something like that. you know, it, you could say it's coach speak. You could say whatever you want to say, but he seems to really mean it. Just what is your takeaways from Coach Rogers as a person, as a coach, and obviously a 2-0 start for him?
I think Coach Rogers has really high standards and their championship level standards. And sometimes that can be a hard conversation for people, right? Is if I know that something is going to make you better and you're going to have success, and the byproduct of that is the team's going to have success, and I hold you to that standard. and maybe you're not reaching or you don't reach it, some people can take that as as a slight against them, right? And I think what Coach Rogers has said very succinctly, I think over the last couple of weeks, is that he wants everybody on this team to have personal success because he knows it leads to team success, but they need to do it a certain way, and those standards don't get sacrificed. And that's been my big takeaway, is that he is continually trying to pull people along with his expectations. And I think when you do that, you then create this really unique culture, because he mentioned a couple times, I think, in the presser on Monday, where the outcome of a play was a positive for Washington State, but the actual process of that outcome was a negative, in that Washington State didn't make the play so much as San Diego State did not make the play. And that's a really important distinction, because that's how you coach players to get better, right? It's really easy as a quarterback to throw a ball and get away with one. And if the coach in the room is saying like, yeah, man, good read, good job, you kind of move past it. But if you're challenged to understand that maybe that wasn't that good of a decision, and maybe I do need to be better, that really raises the bar for you as a player, and ultimately I think makes the team that much better.
Well, the Cougars are 2-0. They're headed down to North Texas looking to improve to 3-0. Saturday, it's a 12:30 kickoff for us back here in the Pacific time zone. Now, if you want to hear more from Alex Brink, you can check in with him and Michael Bumpus on Talking Cougars on Root Sports, also on YouTube. You can find a link to that in this article that you're watching this video on. And Alex, have fun going down to Denton, back up in the booth, I imagine. Your
Yep.
time on the sideline, though, 1-0 this season down on
Yeah,
field
you're
level.
right. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with it. Excited to get back in the booth with Chris and Jess and all the gang.
We thank you as always for stopping by.